What if everything you knew about progress, science, and truth was built on a lie? In the dimly lit archive of a crumbling university library, an unassuming graduate student makes a discovery that changes everything. Tucked between weathered bookshelves, covered in dust, lies a box labeled with a single name: Dr. Elias Krane. Inside are journals, diagrams, and letters, a roadmap to a scientific breakthrough that could have altered the course of humanity. Yet, until this moment, no one even knew Dr. Krane existed. The students' hands tremble as they leaf through the notes. The contents are revolutionary. Energy generation without fuel, a process so efficient it would make fossil fuels obsolete. Yet, as the excitement mounts, a question looms. Why did the world never hear about Dr. Krane? The deeper the student delves, the darker the story becomes. Dr. Crane's work had not been forgotten by accident, it had been erased. Pages of his journal detail breakthroughs and obstacles, but the final entries take a chilling turn. They describe surveillance, threats, and finally, a single haunting line scrawled in hurried script: the truth will outlast their lies. The journals also contain cryptic references to powerful entities, corporations, government bodies, and prominent scientific figures. Each name is a thread in a web of suppression that seems almost impossible to untangle. But why? What was so dangerous about Dr. Crane's discovery that it warranted his erasure? The student's discovery sparks a firestorm. Historians, scientists, and conspiracy theorists alike flock to the library, demanding access to the journals. Media coverage explodes, and soon the name Elias Krane becomes a global phenomenon. But for every article celebrating the discovery, another emerges to discredit it. Some call it a hoax, others a clever marketing stunt, and the rest an inconvenient truth. The narrative fractures before it can take hold. The student receives an anonymous message: drop this now, or you'll regret it. They laugh it off at first, but when their apartment is ransacked, the message becomes clear. Whoever silenced Dr. Krane decades ago is still watching, still pulling strings, and still willing to protect their secrets at any cost. As the student contemplates their next move, the implications of Dr. Crane's work weigh heavy. If his discovery were true, it could undo centuries of energy dependency and reshape the global economy. But exposing the truth could also paint a target on their back. The hook is set. The world is on the edge of a revelation that could redefine history, but at what cost? And most importantly, is the truth still out there, buried under layers of deceit, waiting to be uncovered, or has it been destroyed forever? The next chapter will reveal the broader historical context, the powerful institutions involved, and the stakes of unearthing Dr. Crane's legacy. Introduction. The era was one of rapid progress and equally rapid suppression. To understand the significance of Dr. Elias Crane's work, one must step back into the post-war years of the mid-20th century. It was a time when nations rebuilt their economies on the backbone of industrial energy, and the fossil fuel industry reigned supreme. Governments and corporations were eager to secure their positions of power, often at the expense of innovation that could disrupt their dominance. Dr. Krane, a brilliant but reclusive physicist, had spent his early career working on wartime energy projects. Known among his peers for his unorthodox methods, he was both celebrated and ostracized in academic circles. His refusal to accept funding from corporate sponsors, a rare stance even then, made him a target of suspicion. Crane's groundbreaking discovery emerged from his relentless pursuit of a sustainable, limitless energy source. His notebooks detailed a process he called quantum flux resonance, a phenomenon that harnessed ambient energy from the environment. If true, it would have rendered fossil fuels obsolete overnight. But Crane's insistence on bypassing traditional peer review processes and corporate involvement only fueled skepticism. By the early 1960s, whispers of his work had begun to circulate. Colleagues spoke in hushed tones about his experiments. Articles criticizing his theories appeared in major scientific journals, funded, as it later turned out, by shadowy entities with vested interests in maintaining the status quo. Crane's isolation grew. Friends turned away, universities refused him positions, and he was denied access to research facilities. Still, he pressed on, working in a secluded laboratory he'd built on the outskirts of a small town. This lab would later be raided under dubious pretenses, its contents confiscated and never seen again. Meanwhile, a consortium of powerful figures, including oil executives, defense contractors, and government officials, met in secret to discuss Crane's work. Minutes from one such meeting, leaked years later, revealed chilling language. Dr. Crane's theories, if realized, pose a threat to national security and economic stability. All necessary steps must be taken to neutralize this risk. The stakes of suppression extended beyond profit. Fossil fuels were not just an energy source but a geopolitical weapon. Control over oil equated to control over nations. Crane's discovery could have disrupted decades of careful balance, shifting power away from established centers. But how do you silence a man whose work could change the world? The answer was systematic: discredit, isolate, and, if necessary, eliminate. As the walls closed in around him, Krane left a trail of cryptic clues, fragments of his research hidden in obscure journals, letters to trusted confidants, and, as it turned out, the very library archive where his student would discover them decades later. This introduction paints a vivid picture of the forces aligned against Krane and the stakes of his discovery. The stage is set for an exploration of the mechanisms of suppression and the chilling extent of their reach. Background context. The seeds of genius are often sown in isolation, watered by obsession, and overshadowed by danger. Elias Crane's journey into the annals of forgotten history began long before his fateful discovery. Born into a modest family in the early 20th century, Krane displayed an early aptitude for physics, dismantling household appliances to uncover their secrets. His teachers, awed by his brilliance, recommended him for scholarships that landed him in the hallowed halls of one of the country's most prestigious universities. Despite his intellect, Krane was a misfit. While his peers sought recognition and career advancement, he was consumed by questions that straddled the line between science and philosophy. What is energy? He often asked. Where does it truly come from, and can it be infinite? These questions earned him admiration from a few but ridicule from many more. During World War II, Krane was recruited into a top-secret government project. Though details of his contributions remain classified, colleagues later hinted that he was instrumental in developing technologies that provided the Allies with a crucial advantage. However, his tenure was short-lived. Crane's refusal to compromise his ethics, particularly his opposition to weaponizing science, led to his quiet dismissal. The war's end marked a turning point. Disillusioned with government and corporate agendas, Krane withdrew from public life, retreating to a remote town where he converted an abandoned factory into his personal laboratory. There, he embarked on a solitary quest to answer the questions that had haunted him since his youth. Crane's work was meticulous, if unconventional. He relied on homemade apparatuses, often scavenged from scrapyards, and logged every observation in his journals. These journals, discovered decades later, revealed a mind unbound by traditional constraints. His experiments with quantum flux, resonance, a term he coined, were groundbreaking. By manipulating subatomic particles, Krane theorized that he could tap into a universal energy field, a limitless reservoir that defied conventional understanding of physics. But genius breeds enemies. Local authorities, tipped off by anonymous reports, began scrutinizing his activities. Some claimed his experiments caused power fluctuations across the town, others whispered about strange lights emanating from his lab late at night. Crane's eccentricity made him an easy target. A local newspaper branded him the mad scientist of Maplewood, further isolating him from the community. The turning point came when Crane's name appeared in a confidential memo circulated among corporate and government elites. Potential threat to energy sector stability, it read. Monitor and contain. Surveillance of his lab intensified. Unmarked cars became a fixture on the quiet streets of Maplewood, and Crane's mail was routinely intercepted. Yet, amidst the pressure, Krane made his greatest breakthrough. His final journal entries, penned in increasingly frantic handwriting, alluded to a successful test. "It works," he wrote. "The energy flows, free and boundless." But celebration was short-lived. Days later, Crane's lab was raided. Witnesses reported hearing the sound of smashing glass and the hum of heavy machinery being hauled away under cover of darkness. Krane himself vanished, leaving behind only fragments of his research and an enduring mystery. The background context lays bare the personal and professional challenges that shaped Crane's path. As the pieces of his life come together, the mechanisms of his suppression become even more sinister. The mechanism of deception. Suppressing a genius is no small feat. It requires a system, a strategy, and a ruthless commitment to control. The silencing of Dr. Elias Krane was not an impulsive act, but the result of a meticulously orchestrated operation. The players were many, their motives diverse, but their shared goal was clear: prevent Crane's discovery from seeing the light of day. At the heart of this effort lay a shadowy alliance of corporate magnates, government agencies, and influential scientists whose interests were deeply entwined with the status quo. The first phase of the suppression was discreditation. Articles appeared in respected scientific journals labeling Krane a fraud. His earlier work was re-examined and criticized, with anonymous sources casting doubt on his integrity. These efforts were backed by substantial funding from energy conglomerates, ensuring the narrative reached a global audience. The aim was simple: make Crane's name synonymous with pseudoscience. Next came isolation. University colleagues who once supported him were coerced into silence. Prominent scientists were offered lucrative grants to publicly denounce his work. Crane's access to research facilities and academic conferences was systematically revoked. Even suppliers of laboratory equipment were warned against selling to him, cutting off his access to essential tools. Surveillance was the third pillar of suppression. Unmarked cars were stationed outside his lab, his phone lines tapped, and his mail intercepted. Reports from whistleblowers within intelligence agencies revealed that Krane was under constant watch, his every move cataloged and analyzed. This surveillance extended to those around him, anyone seen entering or leaving his lab found themselves the subject of scrutiny. The final and most chilling phase was the raid on Crane's lab. Officially described as a safety inspection, the operation was anything but. Armed agents stormed the facility, confiscating all equipment, notes, and prototypes. Witnesses recall the agents moving with precision, as if guided by detailed schematics of the lab's layout. Krane himself was taken away in the dead of night, never to be seen again. Official records of the raid were sealed, and any attempts to access them have been met with bureaucratic stonewalling. Behind the scenes, the confiscated materials were divided among various entities. Some were buried in classified government archives, while others were handed over to corporations for further study. Leaked documents suggest that elements of Krane's work were adapted for military applications. Though no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced, the system that suppressed Krane relied on more than brute force. It employed psychological warfare, leveraging fear and uncertainty to keep potential allies at bay. Scientists who expressed even mild interest in Krane's theories found themselves blacklisted, their careers derailed. Journalists investigating his disappearance were threatened or bribed into silence. The ripple effect was profound, creating an atmosphere where even speaking Krane's name invited suspicion. Despite the thoroughness of the operation, fragments of Krane's work survived. Whether through oversight or the efforts of unknown allies, pieces of his research continued to surface in unexpected places. These fragments would become the seeds of a movement determined to uncover the truth and restore Krane's legacy. But the road ahead was fraught with danger, as the forces that silenced Krane remained as vigilant as ever. Unexpected consequences. What begins as a cover-up often spirals into unintended chaos. The suppression of Dr. Elias Krane's discovery did not simply maintain the status quo, it created ripples that shaped the course of history in ways few could have foreseen. By erasing Krane's work, the shadowy alliance inadvertently condemned humanity to decades of reliance on fossil fuels, a dependency that would exact a heavy toll on the planet. Environmental degradation became one of the most visible consequences. With Krane's revolutionary energy source buried, the exploitation of fossil fuels intensified. Massive oil spills, deforestation, and the acceleration of climate change all stemmed from a system unwilling to let go of its grip on power. While Krane's discovery might not have been a panacea, it could have provided a crucial pivot point, a chance to shift towards sustainable energy. Before the damage became irreversible, the economic ramifications were equally profound. Nations continued to wage wars over oil-rich territories, their conflicts fueled by the pursuit of dwindling resources. The promise of Krane's energy independence might have rendered such conflicts obsolete, but without it, the world remained locked in cycles of violence and instability. Billions of dollars were funneled into military endeavors instead of innovation, stalling progress and deepening inequality. The social impact was no less significant. Communities living near energy extraction sites bore the brunt of environmental and economic harm. Entire populations were displaced, their homes rendered uninhabitable by pollution and industrial expansion. The voices of these communities, much like Krane's, were systematically silenced. Yet, the suppression of Krane's work had subtler, more insidious effects. By establishing a precedent for silencing disruptive innovation, it created a chilling effect on scientific inquiry. Researchers, wary of attracting the same fate as Krane, avoided exploring avenues that might threaten entrenched interests. The resulting stagnation stifled breakthroughs that could have transformed medicine, transportation, and countless other fields. But the most unexpected consequence of Krane's erasure was the emergence of a countercurrent, a movement determined to uncover and disseminate suppressed knowledge. Fragments of Krane's work, smuggled out by unknown allies, began to resurface in obscure publications and underground forums. These scraps of information inspired a new generation of thinkers, their resolve hardened by the injustice done to Krane. One such thinker, a young engineer in the 1980s, stumbled upon a reference to Krane's quantum flux resonance in a defunct scientific journal. Intrigued, they began conducting their own experiments, achieving modest but promising results. Word spread, and soon a network of researchers, activists, and whistleblowers coalesced around the shared goal of vindicating Krane's legacy. This movement faced formidable challenges. Its members were branded as conspiracy theorists and ostracized from mainstream institutions. Funding was scarce and progress slow. Yet, their perseverance bore fruit. By the early 21st century, independent labs began to replicate elements of Krane's work, drawing attention from media and investors alike. The cracks in the edifice of suppression widened, threatening to collapse the carefully constructed narrative that had buried Krane for decades. The unexpected consequences of suppressing Krane's discovery underscore the futility of attempting to control the flow of knowledge. Truth, as Krane himself wrote, has a way of enduring. But as the movement to restore his legacy gained momentum, it also painted a target on its back, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation between those who sought to uncover the past and those who would do anything to keep it buried. The unraveling. The truth, long buried, begins to break free. In the early 21st century, a relentless journalist became the catalyst for uncovering the secrets surrounding Dr. Elias Krane. Fascinated by fragments of information and whispers of a suppressed discovery, the journalist embarked on a dangerous investigation. With access to newly declassified government records and testimony from those connected to Krane's era, they unraveled a chilling tapestry of deceit. The exposé was published under the headline, "The Scientist They Erased, The Hidden Legacy of Dr. Elias Krane." It meticulously detailed the orchestrated efforts to discredit Krane, the clandestine raid on his laboratory, and the systematic silencing of his work. The report named names, exposing a cabal of corporate magnates, government officials, and influential academics who had conspired to suppress a discovery that could have redefined energy as humanity knew it. The revelations sparked a global firestorm. Public outrage erupted, with protests and calls for accountability targeting the implicated entities. Advocacy. Groups demanded transparency in scientific funding and research practices. A generation disillusioned by the status quo found hope and inspiration in Krane's legacy, fueling a groundswell of grassroots efforts to revive his work. Amid the chaos, a breakthrough occurred. The journalist, with the help of whistleblowers, located a hidden cache of Krane's original research, a set of notebooks and prototypes stored in a remote and forgotten facility. The documents were authenticated and shared with independent scientific communities worldwide. Within months, teams of researchers began to replicate elements of Krane's theories. Early experiments showed promise, proving that his work had not been a delusion but a revolutionary leap forward. The pushback was immediate and fierce. Corporations tied to the original suppression launched aggressive campaigns to discredit the findings, branding them as pseudoscience. Labs pursuing Krane's work reported break-ins and acts of sabotage. Researchers faced harassment, and media outlets sympathetic to vested interests spread misinformation to muddy the narrative. Despite the resistance, momentum built. Crowdfunding initiatives and independent backers supported ongoing experiments, bypassing traditional funding channels dominated by those with a stake in maintaining the old order. Activists rallied behind the movement, demanding reforms to ensure that no discovery of such magnitude could ever be buried again. The culmination of the unraveling came with a public demonstration. A coalition of scientists unveiled a working prototype based on Krane's principles, a device capable of generating clean, limitless energy. The demonstration captivated the world, leaving little room for denial. What had begun as a suppressed secret became a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. The legacy of Dr. Elias Krane was finally restored, but the journey underscored a critical lesson: the price of progress is eternal vigilance. The systems that silenced Krane still existed, their tactics evolving with the times. Yet, the success of the movement proved that even the most entrenched powers could not suppress the truth forever. Humanity stood at the threshold of a new era, one shaped by the lessons of the past and the promise of an untethered future.